Hello, critics, non-critics, and friends. Welcome to the Film Optix podcast, where we take a glance into comic book movies, blockbusters, indie films, and everything in between. I'm your host, Christian, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host and Devin, co-host Devin. Well, your name's not And, right? And one? Well,
it has not changed.
Well, you're wearing Nike, so you're not And one, I guess.
Yeah. And one back in the day.
Back in the day. Oh, man, early 2000s. What a time to be alive. But as I said, I'm joined by my co-host here, Devin, and we have two special guests, two friends of the show joining us. We have Nicole Ackman from Next Best Picture, and we have JD Duran from In Session Film. And today we're going to be continuing our franchise revisited series with The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1. And before we begin today's episode, a little bit of housekeeping here for you guys. You can listen to our podcast on platforms around the internet. And if you're a new or seasoned listener to the show, we'd love to hear from you guys. Show us some love and send us a 5-star rating and review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Film Optix. That is Optix with an X. Or we're going to take it a step further for you guys. Email us at filmoptix@gmail.com for any movie-related questions. JD, Nicole, how are you guys doing today? It's great to have you guys back. It feels like forever, but, I feel like we just spoke, yesterday or something. I don't know. But how have you been today?
I'm so excited to be back. I literally, in rewatching this, I was like, I am so excited to have the opportunity to talk about these movies. I feel like The Hunger Games has somehow become the forgotten franchise child, compared to Harry Potter and Twilight, and the other things that were big around that era. So I'm just so excited, Christian, that you're making an excuse to talk about all these really fun franchise movies.
I will echo a lot of that as well. It was really fun to join you to talk some Harry Potter when I did. And like Nicole said, getting to revisit this film, especially this film, I'm very, very eager to dive in. And it's also interesting because I'm pretty sure every time I've been here, Nicole has also been here. So it feels like there's a partnership going on.
Dynamic duo.
Yeah. Is it in your contract?
Yeah, I guess so.
I have a formula.
Is Nicole going to be there? Okay, I'll join. Yeah.
He's like, I can't do it. If Nicole's not there, I won't do the scene. Nope.
Yeah.
Oh, man. But Devin, my co-host, how are you doing? How's your weekend been?
I'm doing swell. The weekend's just getting started.
Yeah. It's, man, I went to a comedy show last night. It was an improv comedy show, and it was a lot of fun. My friend does the music, background music for them. So it was pretty cool. I've never seen anything like that before. And I was super, super into it. A solid, maybe hour and a half show. And it was just amazing. Absolutely loved it. But yeah, yeah, really, really good times. But yeah, as Nicole said, I just love these really big franchises. We haven't even covered not Harry Potter. The Hobbits, which I don't know if I really want to do that one or not, or Lord of the Rings yet. But it's I don't know. I do agree with Nicole. It definitely is the forgotten. It somehow got just swept under the rug. And I think it was
at the time it was so huge though.
Yeah, which is weird.
Yeah.
I think Harry Potter definitely overshadowed a lot of stuff because even during this movie, when it came out in theaters, I believe Game of Thrones was, still airing on TV and whatnot. So it was a really great time, but it feels like this movie came out even further than 2014 when I was looking it up. And I'm like, was it really 2014? And then part 2 came out the year following. I'm like, okay, of course, filming it back to back. But man, it seems so long ago, farther than 2014. It's the strangest thing ever. But, I'm all about the YA fantasy books. So I'm actually thinking about rewatching all of Twilight. And I know I shouldn't do that to myself. But it's the Batman's coming up. We have Kristen Stewart getting her first Oscar nomination. It feels very fitting. As much as I never read the Twilight books, but it's I kind of just want to go back and watch them because I haven't fully watched them. I know what happens, but it is what it is. But I don't know. But are you guys ready to jump into the rebellion and get this thing started off with our.
Hell yeah.
I'm so ready.
Let's do it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back after this introduction to The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1.
I never wanted any of this. I never wanted to be in the games. I just wanted to save my sister and keep Peeta alive.
Miss Everdeen, it's the things we love most that destroy us.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, and we are back with our Mockingjay Part 1 review. I can't believe we're actually this far along, but it's a super short series in a way, but you know, they try to drag it out as much as they can. But I'm going to read the synopsis for everyone out there who hasn't so happened to even have watched this amazing series. Like Nicole said, flew underneath a lot of people's radar. But since we are in the year of the 10th anniversary of the first film dropping, I believe mid-March, I think March 23rd, I want to say, at least in the States, is when it hit theaters. But let me go ahead and read the synopsis for Mockingjay Part 1. So, Katniss Everdeen is into District 13 after she shatters the games forever under the leadership of President Coin and the advice of her trusted friends. Katniss spreads her wings as she fights to save Peeta and a nation moved by her courage. This is, again, directed by Francis Lawrence. I believe he also directed Part 2 as well. And the writers include Simon Beaufoy, or is it Beaufoy? Let's go with Beaufoy. I think so. Mike Arndt, and of course, Susan Collins, who is the author of the Hunger Games books, and stars Jennifer Lawrence, Josh Hutcherson, Liam Hemsworth. We have some Natalie Dormer up in here and some Mahershala Ali. Like, oh my gosh, the entire franchise is filled with like these top A-list actors. It's been crazy to go back and actually watch. And for anyone out there actually listening, and for JD, and I think Nicole already knows this, but this is actually my first time watching Part 1, Mockingjay Part 1 and Part 2. I actually watched this movie twice and did some research, so I'm ready to go.
No, I knew I had to come back for this because after I did the first episode of this series, because I was like, I got to see what he thinks.
Yes. I've watched it twice. I've gone through the YouTube rabbit hole. I am ready to. I even watched the special features that came with my Blu-ray because I was so invested in To Mockingjay Part 1 and Part 2. But before...
Let's hear your thoughts then.
Before,
you should go first.
I will. But before we do, I actually want to get JD's introduction. I wanted to ask him, what was your introduction to Hunger Games? Have you read the books before diving into the film franchise?
So I was introduced to this series with that first film that came out in 2012. And like everyone else, I became swept up with Hunger Games fever. Very much enjoyed that first one quite a bit. And when Catching Fire came out, I really liked that one a lot as well, even more so than the first one. That inspired me to start reading the books. Then the next two films came out, obviously, and I'm a slow reader, so I didn't get to those till after the movies anyway. I finished reading the books somewhere in 2015. So I have read them. It's been so long though. And obviously as cinephiles, we consume so much media all the time that in all transparency, I don't know if I could tell you anything about the books comparatively to the movies and all the differences. It's been so long since I've been in this world. Yeah. That it probably would have been hard for me to even come into this conversation without rewatching this movie, even though I have my notes from when we reviewed it all those years ago. But so I have read the books. I've seen all the films, obviously, several times over. I'm a big fan of this franchise, very much a big fan. I would have loved to have been here for all the conversations, time permitting. But since I wasn't able to do that, the one that I absolutely told Christian I needed to be here was for this one, unequivocally. This is the only one I really wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I asked JD, I'm like, hey, like we're doing Catching Fire, it's the climax, the height of everything. And he's like, yeah, he's like, but I am a Mockingjay Part 1 fan. I'm like, okay. So I think it's always fun and important to, bring people on. I did ask Brendan, but he's not a big Hunger Games fan, as the rest of us.
Yeah, not as much.
And that's okay. I had no clue. I just, figured I'd extend the invitation. But, it's fair. You want to bring people on to celebrate the thing that you love and people who are, it's more interested, more invested into the story. So, well, I guess we'll just start off with our initial rewatch thoughts since I've seen this movie twice. So after I watched
You're the expert now.
I guess so. I was on, man. I watched at least 4 or 5 videos plus the special features, but it was just really cool to see how the movie was put together. So I guess I will start with my initial rewatch. Then we'll go to JD and then Nicole, and then we'll end with Devin. But my initial thoughts, when I first watched it, I couldn't wait. Like after Catching Fire, I've seen Catching Fire 1,000 times. And I was like, man, it ends on like that perfect cliffhanger. There is no District 12. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to watch part 1 of Mockingjay immediately. So I did. And then I watched part 2. And I was like, I feel like I need to rewatch these again to see how I actually feel about it. So I rewatched part 1 today before we recorded, and I love it. Like the political battle, of at least the first half of this book, because I believe Amy Smith did tell me that, since Mockingjay is one giant story, including like just one book, the first half of the book definitely feels separate from, the latter half, in that the first half is more political. And I thought it was fantastic. I love the political struggles and, the tactics that they're using. Not as interesting as, I can't say not as interesting as Game of Thrones, but different, because, this is a dystopian sci-fi story, and just the way how, Peeta has been taken by the Capitol. And I swear for the life of me, I could not remember. For some reason, I thought Peeta dies. For some reason, I thought he died. But then I was thinking, no.
His soul dies.
Yeah.
Peeta as we know him.
Technically, he's a different person now. He's got a new groove, a new look. But everything with, just the surprise actors. Mahershala pretty much coming up within the first like few minutes of the movie, and just the introduction, like the beginning of this movie where Katniss is going through this extreme like PTSD of like everything that happened within Catching Fire, because Mockingjay does happen like right after Catching Fire. Like it kind of just, the ball just rolls straight from there, and she doesn't really have time to recover in the way that we would like her to. And I really just like how we spend a lot of time within District 13, the the district that never was. But overall, I really just love the struggle, the emotional beats of this story, and the fact that it was shot majority in Georgia, I believe. That's my first little fun fact. But all in all, I really enjoyed it. There's not as much action, but I feel like that's fine, because not every movie needs to have like all these big action heavy set pieces in order to be good, because, we have moved away from the Hunger Games portion, and this is getting more into, the weeds of it all, and, the political struggles that's happening, the rebellion, the Mockingjay, and just everyone trying to, well, supposedly, but there's a few people I don't trust in this film, but supposedly, help Katniss reach her goal. But, as we heard in an introduction, she's really just trying to protect the ones that she loves. And that's what I really adore about this film. And also the hanging tree, very, very hauntingly beautiful piece of music there. But that's just
was number 1 on the iTunes chart.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. So I guess we'll move on over to Nicole. What were your initial thoughts on this rewatch?
Yeah, I knew that I don't think this movie is as good as Catching Fire, but I also think Catching Fire is like kind of the be all end all of franchise movies. So this movie definitely sort of fell prey to, after Harry Potter split the last film or the last book into 2 films, every other series was like, we got to split our last book into 2 films. And I do think that it doesn't work as well here as it does in Deathly Hallows. I will say it works significantly better here than it does in the Twilight franchise, in which that third movie is just a bunch of like literally nothing happening. Whereas for the fourth movie, whichever one it is. Whereas for this, I do think that like I can see why they thought they wanted to split it. And I think it kind of works. It kind of doesn't. But there is so much in this that I think is good. I feel like this gets like a really bad reputation. And I don't think it's the bad movie that a lot of people act like it is. There's a lot to admire in this movie. Like you said, this cast, I mean, first of all, put Natalie Dormer in a movie and like, I'm there. Like, that's all I ask from a film. But, you know, we've got Philip Seymour Hoffman, we've got Jeffrey Wright, we've got Mahershala Ali, we've got Patina Miller. Like, there are so many really amazing actors in this. And I think Jennifer Lawrence also in this continues to show like why she became the actress that she is today in terms of her reputation and everything for being talented. Elizabeth Banks is fantastic in this movie as Effie. And Woody Harrelson continues to be the perfect Haymitch. This movie's a lot darker than I remembered it to be. Like, it's a pretty dark film to be a YA franchise. But I also will say, like, the whole segment with Katniss going to visit the wounded and then them getting bombed and then, you know, the sort of thing that they're filming with her and her response to it all, I think is one of the best parts of this entire franchise. Like, I think that scene is so strong and so speaks to the heart of what the Hunger Games is all about. I also think, like, it's really weird to be rewatching this at a time when, you know, there is war going on, and to sort of, like, you know, just to kind of like, it was very jarring for me to be watching this and then looking like on videos on my phone on Twitter of the Ukraine right now, and just sort of thinking about, you know, those themes and the fact that like there have been protests over the past years that have used like the 3-finger salute from the Hunger Games in their protests, which is kind of wild. But I think that the fact that there are those sort of, you know, similarities there kind of speaks to the fact that the Hunger Games really does get at something really important. And I think it's a more real story than a lot of these type of franchise films are trying to tell. And it's frightening how, you know, this dystopian universe doesn't actually feel that far off. You know, it's kind of chilling whenever you think about it that way. But I think that, you know, I have my issues with this movie. I think it does sort of meander for a lot of it. I think that they could have really tightened it up in a lot of places, but I still think it's a pretty good film.
I think you bring up a lot of great points, Nicole. The scary part is that, you know, this isn't, you're like, things in Harry Potter will never happen, or, you know, things in, I don't know, Divergent would never happen in the far future, but it's something like this can easily happen within our culture, especially here in America, especially how, you know, Pan Am is essentially modeled after that. So it's kind of, it's really crazy to think about. Like this is one of the most realistic, as you said. But let's pass it over to JD. I'm very interested to hear this man's thoughts about Mockingjay Part 1. So give us your initial rewatch thoughts.
So as we've noted, this film has its reputation, and I do not understand it for the life of me. If someone wants to argue, and it sounds like you guys are, that Catching Fire is the best film of this franchise, I think that's very fair. Mockingjay Part 1 is my favorite of the bunch, and I think it's the most thematically and emotionally rich of the 4 films, and it's not even close for me. Not even close. And it's interesting how Nicole is tethering it to the events that's unfolding in front of us right now, because there are a lot of poignant parallels to what's happening in Ukraine and in this film. Specifically, I think about that everyone's talking about this fighter pilot, the Ghost of Kiev, he's been coined, who's maybe shot down, 6 Russian jets, which is an insane feat by today's standards with air-to-air combat. But even if that's not true, people have used him as a symbol for hope when it comes to what's happening in this crisis. And there's been a lot of I hate to use the word fanfare, but there's been a lot of people getting behind this pilot from a symbolic and emotional perspective that's very akin to Katniss in this movie and how she's being used as a symbol to bring these districts together and succumb a little bit of hope as they fight back against the Capitol. And those parallels I just find incredibly striking. And to speak to what you guys are saying in terms of how, the political warfare in this movie, how it does tailor to real life events. And as you were talking about earlier, Christian, this is a film that isn't built on action, much like the other films in this franchise. And I do think the action we get in the other films is pretty good for the most part. But this is a film that has 2 action scenes in it. 2. This is a political warfare movie at its heart. It's a meditation into the psychology of revolution. And that I find fascinating. If you're wanting action, if you're wanting conventionality, you're going to be left cold with this film. It has almost none of that. From scene to scene, it's a depiction of Katniss grappling with her psychology, grappling with this idea of being a symbol, of being the Mockingjay, something that she does not want at all, but something that she has to embrace if she wants to not only bring the districts together. And over the course of the film, such as the scene that Nicole brought up with the hospital, she comes to realize that it's much bigger than herself. It's much bigger than her wanting to save Peeta. But that is a big part of it for her as well. She has to embrace being the symbol to save this person that she loves in Peeta, that she wants to get out from the Capitol. But then it becomes something bigger than herself. And there's a struggle there. And a lot of this film is just conversation, or it's just a camera on Jennifer Lawrence as she struggles to figure out what her next steps are going to be. Can she even do this? I mean, there's a 3-minute sequence in this film where she's just walking through District 12 and into her house, and she says nothing for 3 minutes. We just follow her through all of that. Or it's her talking to Gale, or her talking to President Coyne, or whoever it is. That's a lot of this film. It's just conversation. Finnick, like the scenes she has with Finnick where they're just conversing about the circumstances that they're in. And there's something about that unconventional approach, the thematic ideas at play here, the psychology at play, that is first and foremost what this film is about. And I find it enthralling. I love, a lot of it could certainly be the performances, as Nicole was talking about as well. I think it's in the writing. But there's so much about that in this film. It's such a rich film to kind of dig into from a thematic and emotional perspective, juxtaposed to the convention and a lot of the action you get in the other movies, which again is good. I'm a big fan of this franchise, but this one, unlike any others of not just this franchise, but kind of its kin, it's so different. I love this for the same reasons I love Deathly Hallows Part 1, which I can't remember if I was here to talk about that one or not, but
I can't remember either. It was only last
but
year.
I love that one as well because it's built on the same premises, really.
Right.
But to me, that's what makes Mockingjay Part 1 stand out, and I ate every second of it.
Okay. So actually, that did jog my memory. For Part 1, it was actually just me and Brendan Cassidy.
Yeah, I think I was supposed to be here and I couldn't for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something happened, but it's all good. Yeah. But I do agree with you, JD. It is this it's such a daunting, it's a very depressing film. Like you spend a lot of, most of the time underground, District 13 and, they've a little fun fact. I guess I'm not sure, correct me if I'm wrong for those who have read the books, but I believe when District 13 did rebel before, they were driven away, obviously bombed. They're technically not a part of Pan Am anymore. They're their own separate operation. So I believe they made a deal with Pan Am to kind of, just kind of move away and kind of do their own thing. But secretly, obviously, just been trying to figure out a way to overthrow. And then, here comes Katniss. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like the perfect opportunity. But I do agree with you on all fronts, JD. It's very similar to Deathly Hallows Part 1 because it is the setup of the payoff. Obviously, we're not talking Part 2 of Mockingjay, so I won't mention anything about that. I'm still wrestling with that one for sure. I got to rewatch that one as well. But let's move over to Devin. What was your initial reactions to this movie? I know it's been a while for you as well.
Yeah, since it first came out. But I pretty much echo what everyone else has been saying. I kind of agree with what's been said. I definitely don't truly understand why it has such a bad rap. I feel like it feels tonally and even kind of visually different than the first two, which might have something to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
I read that it's the first one of the series to be shot digitally. That might have something to do with it, but I definitely liked a lot about this movie. I loved the Peeta arc where he's just kind of deteriorating his exterior. It's just kind of crazy. That was done with CGI apparently. I was actually pretty impressed by that.
Really? Oh wow. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I remember when I first saw it, I thought that was kind of like it was a little scary. Like he's a little goblin just kind of wasting away, and he's attacking Katniss. Like, who is this monster? I thought you were just a nice little baker, Peeta. What are you doing? But yeah,
force choking people out here.
Yeah, he really went after her, and that was
learned some wrestling moves in the Capitol. Apparently,
definitely jarring. I loved Hanging Tree. It's a classic. There's a few parts with there's just kind of some generic military like tactile scenes that kind of feel out of place, where you're just seeing like generic type soldiers. Doesn't seem like it really fits in this world. I can kind of see that, and
wish it was more like exotic, like kind of like how the Capitol is.
Yeah, just really kind of
match up
different because the Capitol has that very distinct look. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed it overall. Do I like it more than the first two? I wouldn't say so. I think I enjoy the first two a little bit more, but overall, good time, and looking forward to rewatching the second one as well.
That's going to be amazing. Like I'm very, very excited, but I guess wanted to kind of, pass over because when I want to kind of go back what JD was saying earlier, that he watched the franchise first and then that prompted him to read the books. And I honestly think that is probably the best way to experience, these young adult fantasies, books or novels, like, especially if you haven't read them before, because that's what happened with me in Game of Thrones. Like, I've obviously, as I was watching it, it just prompted me to go back and watch and read the books, because you get so much more in depth of a feel to it and just a better understanding of that world. So it's like, I know a lot of people who haven't even read or watched Harry Potter because they're like, yeah, like, my parents didn't let me, or due to the whole Christian witchcraft thing. And they're like, oh, well, I feel like it's too late for me. But I would say even for, Hunger Games, like I had never read the books. I did pick up the trilogy about a few years ago. I haven't picked it up. I'm a terrible book reader, honestly. But, rewatching this, for the 10-year celebration, especially of the first movie coming out this year, it's definitely, pushing me to go back and just kind of dive more into this world, because even with Effie, I believe she was not she did not go to District 13 at all. She stayed at the Capitol, which I thought was interesting. But going into President Coin, this lady, I do not trust at all. 100%. But I really like how, on my rewatch, going back and obviously, doing a little bit of research and going back and rewatching it, a few small things kind of started like popping out to me, especially when when Katniss first, goes to District 13, and during the first big, I guess you can say, rally with President Coin, and she notices there's not a lot of children. And Prim kind of just mentions like, oh, there was a pandemic that kind of wiped out their children. But also they don't really mention that actually left a lot of the adults infertile so they can't reproduce. So I was like, okay, that's a pretty nice little nod. Like I really enjoy how this franchise, and I feel like some YA franchises kind of just assume that everyone knows what's going on, because even with Lupin and Tonks, them getting married, we like in the movie, if you never read the books, you have no clue that Lupin was about to have a son. And like they casually mention it. I think it was in part 1 of Deathly Hallows. I can't really remember. But if you weren't a book reader, you had no clue what they were talking about whatsoever. But I like how with this franchise, especially this film, it takes the time, like there's a lot of expedition, but it takes the time to assume that people haven't read the books and that, there are going to be a lot of first time watchers, viewing these films, and that it's the small little attention to details. So that's something I really picked up on. But I guess I kind of wanted to throw it out to you guys. Were there any big book to film differences from at least part 1 that you guys noticed that you enjoyed? Any changes of adaptation, or you would have done any differently? I guess go ahead, Nicole.
The biggest one is, like you said, the fact that Effie is in the film and she's not in this part of the book at all, really. And I think that it's a really good thing that they put her in, first of all, because Elizabeth Banks is like fantastic in this role. And I think that what they also did with the characters of Effie and Haymitch and their like little, back and forth banter is so good in these movies. I love them together. And I think that also it's really important, I think, to sort of show Effie, who's this person who's lived in the Capitol her whole life, and how she's having to adjust to life in District 13. I think that's actually like so poignant. But I think otherwise, like most of the changes are kind of small. There's a lot of small changes, but I think they're all ones that like make perfect sense for the sort of purposes of cutting it down to a 2-hour film. There are parts that the one thing that I do wish that they'd mentioned, I don't think it comes up in the movie at all, is that after everything happened with the Court of Quell, all of the stylists and hair and makeup teams of the tributes were killed in the Capitol. And that's like, I think speaks so much to what the Capitol is like, that like these are Capitol citizens who just happen to be associated with these people. And it, Katniss really feels that sort of as a blow that, all these people, that many of them were even, being helpful to these tributes and whatever. But I really do feel like they did a good job of sort of managing to get all of the most important parts of the book in a way that felt cinematic.
Okay.
Yeah, I was reading that Suzanne Collins actually called the director and just mentioned that Evie Trinket could not be in the Mockingjay film.
Yeah.
When
she was like, that was my baby.
Sorry about that. That's my mistake.
Yeah. And even when I was watching the special features, like I guess Susan Collins, she was very involved with everything. And of course, with director Francis Lawrence, he directed Catching Fire, and it's like, okay, why would you not want to have him come back? And he actually finished the rest of the franchise. And I mean, just from the special features themselves, you can really see how invested he was into this world, much like Christopher Columbus was with the first 2 Harry Potter movies. Like you could just see all the love on screen. It was fantastic. But I wanted to pass it over to JD if you had any comments on any book to screen adaptations that you liked or disliked.
Well, look, I'll be honest. I don't really recall a lot of the book, and I certainly didn't have time to reread it. So,
JD, you
I
had
don't
one
know if
job.
I have. I know. I just had to reread the book too.
Come on, quick.
It was in the fine print of your contractual agreement with Nicole onto this podcast.
I know, but I mean, I guess speaking of though, I could certainly bounce off of a few things she was saying there, because I do think, one of the more touching scenes of the film, it's subtle, it's brief, but there is the moment where Katniss does ask about Cinna and she assumes that he's dead. So it is brought up in a brief moment where she just kind of comes to realize again just how devastating these circumstances are in the middle of her wrestling with should I even embrace being the Mockingjay? So to have that moment there, it's not just a callback to that character or to something that may or be in the book, but in the context of this film, I think it's thematically very appropriate that as she's wrestling with this, that's another thing that she learns about. And I agree with you guys about Elizabeth Banks. She is so great in this franchise. And I think having Effie here in the ways that she is her identity is completely changing right in front of us, and to see her embrace it, it would have been easy given her lifestyle to just, become a hermit in her little room and stay there and be bitter, but that's not really what she chooses. She is so drawn to Katniss and knows that if Katniss is going to do this, that she's going to have to be by her side. And by taking those steps alongside Haymitch when he comes in as well. And both of those characters are quite different than what we've seen them in the first two films. And I love how this film kind of inverts that in a lot of ways. Again, going back to how different this is all around. And to me, that's what, that's what I love about this movie.
I also will say another thing I just thought of is I think District 13 in the movie isn't quite as strict as it is in the book. In the book, like, it's wild. I remember there's something about like each person is allowed the amount of food ration per day that they've calculated is required to keep their body running, but not more. Like they're really intense to the point that you can kind of see a little bit more, especially why Katniss is so at first like, I don't know that I want to be here either. Like, they're like so sort of over the top. It really is like, okay, that whole effect of like they've swung the full way opposite of the Capitol to their own detriment. And I think that's a little bit more obvious in the book, whereas I think in the film, they're trying a little bit more to get us to trust District 13 in Mockingjay Part 1. Obviously, I think a lot of us, like you said, Christian, were immediately like, no, don't trust this lady.
I'm sorry. I'm blanking on the actress' name who played President Coin. She was like, when I was watching this.
Julianne Moore.
Yes, Julianne Moore. Yes.
Yeah.
She reached out. Like, she wanted to play President Coin, which
I love that.
Yeah. Like, again,
I thought her kids were fans of the series.
Yeah. Like, she was like all on board. And of course, we fortunately had lost Philip Seymour Hoffman during this time as well. But with President Coin, it's like you said, Nicole, it's like it's built to like, oh, hey, you're in District 13, we were also destroyed, you're safe with us. And I'm like, it's a bit,
but that was the mythical ethos of District 13 in the previous two films. That it was this potential safe place that they could all go to. And I do like that this film doesn't necessarily get bogged down in some of those details, although maybe learning some of those insights could have been interesting. But instead of, getting too bogged down in that, instead the film focuses on, again, the psychology of these characters, specifically Katniss, and, her kind of battling that idea of, is this place somewhat trustworthy, which is what I love so much about Philip Seymour Hoffman in this film, because he becomes that mechanism for her where, he pulls her in and she somewhat, trust him in a way. I agree that there's a lot about President Coin that is murky for sure. And you do sense that. But overall, the film does kind of build up that this can be a safe place, or like a safe haven for all these people, which then obviously in the next film, we kind of learn a lot more about, what's really going on, the mechanics of all that. But I do like that this film never, at least for me, it doesn't stray too far from the psychology angle of it. It might throw in a few details here and there. Like, Katniss is like, yeah, my sister gets to keep her cat. Inferring that it's so strict here that you can't even have cats. So it's kind of thrown in there, those little caveats, but all of that is woven within the political warfare nature of this film, whether it be Katniss early on with President Coin herself trying to manipulate her advantages, or later on with President Snow as well.
And also we kind of finally see, I believe Nicole mentioned this in the first Hunger Games, where, they talk about, the Capitol cutting out people's tongues. And we finally get our first, I think, Vox, I forgot the name of the term already, but we get our
Avox, I think is what it is. Yeah.
And who is actually, for those who are big Daredevil fans, he's, I forgot the actor's name. I do apologize, but he plays Foggy in the Daredevil series as Charlie Cox's right-hand man for all the Daredevil fans out there. So it was a really nice surprise to see him as well. I was like, oh wow, like that's pretty cool. But I agree with you there, JD. It is, I don't know, with President Coin, there's, she has this like persona where, like, I was very confused the first time I watched. I'm like, okay, who is she the president of, and why is she the president, and why is it this way? And then obviously, doing the research and rewatching, I'm like, oh, okay, so I guess, she did lose her child and her husband during the pandemic when, I think it was smallpox or something of that nature. That was like the pandemic that they were mentioning. But yeah, she's very, you can definitely see, she is another large, even though she's not widely known, especially within District 13, it seems more like a last resort type place that you would want to go versus a safe haven, as JD mentioned earlier, because I don't know if I could live like that. It's just very, they're condensing like just down to the bare like essentials of what you need to survive, which is, I kind of understand, especially in this kind of world.
But at least you're not being killed by the Capitol.
Right.
Because that is the other option.
Right. And as we've seen with the other victors as well, especially, oh gosh, Man with the Trident. What was it?
Finnick Odair.
Finnick, yes. Sorry.
How dare you forget Finnick.
The way I said it, like, she was like, my favorite character is.
Like, Man with the Trident. Man with the Trident. That's
man.
I'm like, wow, Finnick. You can hear my hard eyes happening.
It's, oh my God. But I think, even his journey, like he is in this movie, but not more so with the, dialogue scenes with Katniss, because he's a little, he's shaken up. He lost his Victor partner. The Capitol also has his love of his life hostage. And I really like how, I think it was the cutaway scene when they're doing the rescue mission towards the end of the movie, where, you kind of get a little bit more into President Snow. And I wish we would have gotten like more, just like a little bit more, like, because it felt like it came in bits and chunks when he kept talking like through the feeds to kind of distract, what was actually going on with the plan. I thought that was pretty, I thought it was pretty clever for sure. I like the editing there, but wanted to open up to you guys really quick. If you had any other points or likes or dislikes you wanted to bring up that we haven't gotten to already. I guess I'll start with Devin, then I'll go to JD, and then end with Nicole.
I actually have some pretty interesting trivia facts here on the old IMDb
Devin coming
page.
back with the trivia. I love it.
I think my favorite one by far is Liam Hemsworth mentioned that prior to their kissing scenes, Jennifer Lawrence would purposely eat garlic and fish type of foods.
Yeah, I remember that.
Wait, why?
Yeah.
Was she in a relationship or something? Or just in general?
There was no context given. Just maybe she's just trolling.
I think it was just a joke. Yeah. Just like a practical joke.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense, yeah.
It's also interesting to see that Jennifer Lawrence decided to stop dyeing her hair for this movie. She was just tired of dyeing her hair back and forth, so she went with a wig. And that wig reportedly cost $30,000.
It was actually a pretty convincing wig.
Oh yeah,
for the most part.
That iconic.
I don't know what her natural hair color is though.
She's natural blonde.
Natural. Oh, okay. See, yeah, I did not know that. Wow, the more you know. Okay, wow, that's a very expensive wig. Yeah. It's better than the wig from Taylor Lautner in Twilight because that
one was 30 cents, not $30,000.
Oh my gosh!
They actually didn't buy that; they just found it somewhere. I think.
We just went to some random prison. Like, yeah, we got this like hair just hanging around. Like, we'll make it into a wig. It's fine. But yeah, I totally forgot that she was actually naturally blonde. But sorry, Devin, go ahead.
This is the first film to not include a kiss between Katniss and Peeta. Very sad for you. You Katniss Peeta stands.
There's more of the BDSM part on theirs.
Yeah, they were into something else, I guess.
Oh, God.
They skipped a step.
Oh, boy.
He just took it up like 10 levels. I'm like, whoa. Oh, my God.
And then this last one I think is also very interesting. This is the only film in the franchise to not open in the same year as a movie featuring Thor, played by Chris Hemsworth.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's funny.
Okay, that's funny.
Oh, interesting.
Liam's like, I win this
I
year.
get this one. This is my one time to shine.
This is my. I mean, Gale he's a big part of this movie, and this weird love triangle between Katniss and Peeta and Gale, and Gale kind of just tells her what's up. Like, listen, he's like, you only care about me when I'm like in pain or suffering, and that's the only time I can get your attention. And he just he's like, don't worry, it'll pass. I'm like, oh man, this is a baller. He's not wasting any more time whatsoever. You can still tell that he cares, but yeah, it's crazy stuff. But let's move over to Nicole. Did you have any other things you wanted to bring up for this episode?
Yeah. First of all, I will just say, as someone who doesn't like Peeta as a character, this is a perfect movie for me because I don't have to see him too much.
Got him.
I'm a Gale girl. I'm a Finnick girl. So you know what? This movie, it's it for me.
Okay, then.
I love it. No, but I really did want to bring up, I think that the costume design and the production design in this movie are actually so good and so interesting because they actually go like a really long way towards building the world of District 13 in terms of how like austere everything is. And I think that sort of the costuming and the production design tell us so much about this world that they then don't have to like explicitly say to us. And I also think they did a really good job with sort of all the scenes, the couple of scenes that we do see of warfare where we're seeing bombings and all that. I think they actually did a pretty decent job with those scenes. But yeah, I think that this is an interesting one because we don't sort of get the grand performances that we get in the Hunger Games or in Catching Fire because we don't have these arena scenes. Like we're not seeing people go through things in the same way that we have been in the last two movies, which allows for a lot more like introspection, I think, particularly for Katniss.
That's my word. You're speaking my language.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is one of the best things about this is we sort of see Katniss dealing with it. And I think that it gives also a little bit of a look into the idea that like, no matter what happens for Katniss, she's never going to be okay again. Like she's never going to be able to unhave all of these experiences that she's had. And I think that, even though he's not in it that much, the bond between Katniss and Finnick as two people who went through this thing
twice
is really important because it also sort of speaks to the fact that it's really hard for either of them to connect with other people who haven't been through this. And I think that that's something that we kind of continue to see and why Katniss continually feels drawn to Peeta. Is just that shared experience. I think that's sort of something that goes through all of the movies, but we see it sort of here in the fact that it's not just Peeta specifically, that she also feels this sort of connection to Finnick himself, and he feels that connection to Joanna and to Annie, and I think they do a good job of showing that obviously Katniss is really upset about Peeta, but he's not the only one who's been lost, and he's not the only she's not the only one who's mad at the Capitol in this way on this personal level, and I think they do a good job of that. I do think I was going to say, I think I slightly prefer Mockingjay Part 2 to Mockingjay Part 1, but I think both of them, like, I think for one thing, just kind of unfortunately came out after people were sort of like done with the Hunger Games. And I think that they sort of got these bad reputations that they don't deserve at all. And I wish that more people would give both of these movies a second chance.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And even with Jeffrey Wright's character, as you mentioned, like he's gone through a lot as well. Even he seems a little bit more composed in this film. He's in his wheelchair and whatnot, but his his design of like, the Capitol's like defense system, because he comes from the district that pretty much deals with technology, and they seem to be very underpaid from this. It's another fun fact that I learned. Well, I was like, oh yeah, I just love how I know all this stuff. I'm like, I still want to go back and read the books. But yeah, with his character, he's very like the guy in the chair type. I mean, quite literally, but he goes through his own thing. You kind of see that more in Catching Fire than you do part one, at least, and moving onward. But JD, I'll pass it over to you if there's anything you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo some of what Nicole was saying there, I mean, the introspection of this film is what I love so much about it, as I've been saying. And you certainly do get a lot of that here with Katniss. I just feel like from scene to scene, because, again, there's only 2 action beats in this film. A lot of it is conversation between Katniss and other characters as we tap more into her psychology and her wrestling with being this symbol. And, when you see how drawn she is not to just Peeta, that shared experience is certainly palpable in Katniss, but also Gale and Finnick and all these other characters around her that she also cares for. That for her to embrace something that she doesn't want to do, I think is really compelling, thematically speaking, but especially in Jennifer Lawrence's performance. And I cannot emphasize enough how fantastic I think she is here in terms of tapping into that psychology and the emotion, and even some of the levity here. There's a couple of one-liners she throws at Haymitch that is subtly quite funny. There's that moment of bad acting she has when they're shooting that first promo. And I know some actors have talked about how acting bad is kind of challenging, because you go through all this training to be a great actor and then you're forced to do it badly.
She was great. She was great at acting bad. It's interesting.
She was. But as the film goes, we do get to see her, I think, channel some really visceral emotion and psychology. I think about that moment when she finds the rose in her house when she's going through District 12, and there's that close up on her, and just it's all in her facial mannerisms, but you sense trepidation in that moment, which is so great. Or there's the moment when she's talking with President Snow. We've talked about how this is a political warfare movie. There's that moment where the 2 of them are going back and forth, and Gale and his team are trying to, get Peeta and all of them to escape off camera. What we see is, again, it's a conversation. There's a moment of action happening, but what this film emphasizes is the conversation between Katniss and President Snow going back and forth in this political way. At the end of it, there's the reveal that Snow knows exactly what's happening the whole time. And he turns away from the camera and walks away, and she flips out because she, in that moment, realizes that both Peeta and Gale, arguably the 2 closest people to her, aside from her mother and sister, could be killed at the exact same moment. And that moment, I think, is absolutely devastating because of not just how the film builds up the psychology here, but Jennifer Lawrence's performance alone there is absolutely terrific. So there's a lot to love about this film, I think. And one of you, I can't remember who, forgive me, but we were talking about Peeta and just the transformation of him over the course of the film. It is that moment between the 2 of them. I know we joked about it, but it is quite harrowing to see just how physically devolved he has become because of what he experienced in the Capitol, and then him lashing out at Katniss is, quite, it's a threatening moment that's, pretty visceral on screen, I think. So, which, leads to some interesting ambiguity as to where things will pick up in the next movie, at least on that first watch. So, I really like this film a lot. I just love how slow it is. I love how methodical it is, how psychologically driven it is. To me, give me that kind of stuff all day long. I absolutely love it. So yeah, I will champion this among the many that are quick to dismiss it.
I wonder what, like, obviously we saw Peeta, going through, we see Peeta on screen, off screen type situation. I wonder if those messages were like pre-recorded as like, when was he actually tortured? Was it during like in between each broadcast that he had when, we finally figure out, like, is Peeta alive? Is Peeta alive? And yeah, like I said before, for some reason, I thought Peeta died and I don't know why. But as we mentioned, he kind of does in a way. But I wonder how that transformation, with the Tracker Jacker Venom, like, did that happen right after he, like essentially like risked his life to give them the warning about, the Capitol bombing District 13 with like their outdated map information. I'm not sure when that necessarily happened. I guess I'm assuming it progressively started happening, or was that like staged? I'm not entirely sure, as we, saw with Katniss and her propaganda, as you mentioned, with the the bad acting, which was it's just always fun to see. Everyone's just like, oh, that was just not good, not very convincing at all. But yeah, that was. I wonder how they did that. I don't know if the books kind of explain that a little bit more, because I mean, I just feel bad for the man's being tortured, and the associated pain associated with like a specific like item or person. And it's like you said, JD, he really just lashes out like completely unexpected. I actually jumped for a second. I was like, Peeta, what are you doing? I'm like, oh yeah. He's been in the Capitol for a while. So it's very tragic to see this transformation. And, much like Katniss, I mean, obviously Peeta's gone through his own trials and tribulations. He will like literally never be the same person ever again. Like, it's the personality, the person that we knew, the sweet little Peeta who disguised himself as a piece of bark is over. he's gone. He's long gone. But we are coming up on.
Well, and that's something Finnick even speaks to, I believe, right? At one moment, he even says just being in the games, killing people is you'll change forever. You'll never be the same person again.
Yeah, I believe Peeta mentioned a little bit as well, and he was saying that he's, I don't know if it was like him saying he was a victim or him saying that, it wasn't just, he's a victor, but you're still a slave and you still have to live with that. You essentially had to kill, 23 other people, including and like someone from your your district, maybe indirectly, but it's, you kind of just stay together as long as you can until something happens, and it really just takes a toll on you. I really like how this franchise, and unfortunately, with Harry Potter, as much as it was like a nice little like happy ending for everyone, towards the end, I feel like, with this movie, you're definitely going to see a lot of changes that are permanent. Because with Harry Potter, it's like, oh, we're going to put everyone in the old fat suits and stuff like that. But it's like, I mean, they went through a lot of traumatic stuff as well. So it's like, you would think that things aren't always just like happy-go-lucky, like, oh, and all was well. Well,
this is a lot more realistic.
Yeah, very, very more realistic than, but it is what it is. But yeah, it was, man, oh man, this movie has been very eye-opening for sure. But let's go around. Well, I feel like we already did final thoughts. So let's just go into a quick rating, and then we'll close on out here, because we're pressed for time for everyone. JD has a very busy schedule. I have him today.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
No, you're totally fine. So we'll go through ratings, and then we'll give the floor to JD and Nicole so they can tell everyone where they can find them on the internet. So we'll start with Devin, then we'll go to JD, and then end with Nicole for ratings, and I'll give mine as well towards the end.
Yeah, as far as ratings go, I'm feeling, like I mentioned before, I think I had the first two Hunger Games a bit higher than this one, but this one's still definitely entertaining enough, and I think I'm going to go with a solid 75. Just kind of solid.
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 All right, JD, what about you?
Oh, man. I don't really do ratings anymore.
Fair enough.
So this is real. I hadn't even really thought about it.
You signed a contract.
I mean, If I'm rating this on Letterboxd, I'd probably give it 4 out of 5 stars. That's probably where I'd sit with this if I was doing that exercise.
All right. Nicole, what about you?
Yeah, I have this rated on Letterboxd at a 3 out of 5 stars. I'm somewhere in between a 3 and a 4 star on it, like a,
3.5.
It's
No,
yeah, maybe a 3.5. Like, I don't know. Honestly, I'm really like a 6.5 out of 10 on it. Like, because I don't like it as much as the other Hunger Games movies. I think that like it does have some plot issues with it. And again, I do knock it down a little bit for the fact that like I don't think they need to split this into 2 movies. But I do still think the acting's good, the design's good, all of that. So I'm gonna say like a high 3 stars.
A high C.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, rating it again on Letterboxd, I think give it 4 out of 5. I gave the first Hunger Games a 4 out of 5 as well, but I definitely enjoy the first one a little bit more. And thinking about it, like what Nicole was saying, like it could have been one movie. I don't know. I feel like they might have been able to make it more clear cut. Because
maybe like one 3-hour movie.
Yeah. Something like that. Because I'm not sure if the front end part 1's the issue or part 2 is the issue. Because I need to go back and rewatch part 2 because I was a little confused towards the end because of what happens, but I think it was the execution because it just threw me off guard. I was like, wait, so is this not what I thought this was? But I don't know. It is what it is. But yeah, I would give it like a solid 4 out of 5 stars for different reasons for me giving the original Hunger Games 4 out of 5 stars. But I definitely enjoy the first one a little bit more. And I mean, I get it. Even on Rotten Tomatoes, I think right now as of today, I think the tomato meter for critics is sitting at a 69. And then for audiences at a 71. So I think, I don't know, people, I guess they were just expecting more of an arena thing, but that mainly happens in part 2. But we'll definitely be back talking about part 2 later in April. So I'm going to open the floor over to JD and to Nicole so they can let everyone know where they can find them on the internet. Guess we'll start with Nicole, then we'll end with JD, and then we'll close on out.
Yeah, I am on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at Nicole Ackman16. In all those places, I also have a link tree that sort of has links to the different places that I podcast and write and do all of that. My main gig is over at Next Best Picture, where you can hear me talking about all sorts of stuff and writing lots and lots of film reviews. I also do have my own podcast with my friend Maggie called Petticoats and Poppies, which is a period drama podcast where we both sort of talk about films because we have a background in history. We both have degrees in history and sort of unpack the history behind films that are about historical subjects. So, yeah.
Nice. JD, where can everyone find you online?
Well, the easiest way is insessionfilm.com. There we have podcasts, written reviews, all kinds of fun things. On social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, just search In Session Film. You'll find all of our stuff there. But again, the easiest way to find everything we do is insessionfilm.com. And thanks again for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah, no, of course, thank you guys for, again, coming on. And for everyone out there listening, all of their, where to find Nicole and JD, all of their links will be in the episode notes of this podcast as well. Again, thank you guys so much for coming on. This is a lot of fun. So what's coming up on our podcast, you might ask? We do have our the Batman non-spoiler coverage review that will be coming up on Tuesday, March 3rd. And then we have our spoiler coverage that will be dropping Monday, March 7th, the weekend after, so everyone has a chance to see the movie. We've been doing a lot of TV reviews coverage lately. Did Peacemaker, that's up on the podcast right now, season 1. Did The Witcher 2 earlier this year as well. And if you're a big sci-fi fan, for Raised by Wolves season 2, me and Leo from Geekly Goods kind of covered the first 6 episodes over there, as well as we have like our Scream review, and then, oh my gosh, Jackass Forever, things of that nature. So definitely check out our other episodes and make sure to share an episode with a friend, your mother, your brother, your lover, whoever it may be. Share them an episode of the Film Optix podcast. And we're going to pretty much wrap up here for today. Again, wanted to thank JD for coming on, even though we had to split a little bit. And of course, love you, Nicole Ackman. Thank you so much for coming on again. Always a pleasure to have you on. So let's close.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And that's a wrap for today. Thank you all for listening. And if you enjoy the show, leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And follow us on Twitter and Instagram to stay in the know. That was JD, Nicole, Devin. My name is Christian. And we'll see you guys in the next one. And may the odds be ever in your favor.